We're concentrating on knife crime. This is after a fourth fatal stabbing in the space of just 6 days. And there are now calls for the Prime Minister to put 10,000 police officers back onto the streets. Senior Labour politicians, including the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, have written this in a joint letter to Theresa May. Well, we can get more now on the knife crime crisis. We can speak to the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who is in our Westminster studio for us this morning. Good morning to you, Sadiq Khan.
Good morning.
Just looking at the statistics, I mean, they are frightening for people up and down the country, but focusing in on London in particular, there have been 21 fatalities relating to knife crime since the start of this year. And people this morning want to know what you're doing about it.
And it's distressing. 5 of those, by the way, have been teenagers, and I've met many bereaved families and grieving siblings as well. A number of things we're doing, notwithstanding the challenges we have. City Hall have funded a violent crime task force, 300 officers who are targeting high knife crime areas. Over the course of the first 8 months, they've made more than 3,000 arrests leading to charges and taken more than 1,000 knives, offensive weapons and guns off our streets. Additionally, we're investing in young people, giving them preventative things to do, £45 million in a Young Londoners Fund. But the point I make is the causes of the increase in violent crime are extremely complex, deep-seated problems. I'm not excusing criminality, poverty, social alienation, inequalities, mental health issues, issues around exclusions, made far worse by the massive cuts we've had in our police officer numbers, but also massive cuts in youth services and preventative services as well. That's why we're lobbying the Prime Minister to step in and take a lead in this issue.
You're also lobbying the Prime Minister on school exclusions today. That's something that you're focusing on this morning, because you've mentioned a wide range of issues here. I just want to know why you're focusing on school exclusions. They've increased by 56% in the last 3 years. But where's the evidence that this is linked to the rise in knife crime?
A really good question. So we're not saying, nobody's saying that exclusions is the sole reason why there's been a massive increase in violent crime across the country.
Not the sole reason, but where is the link?
Well, a few things. Firstly, in England and Wales, the education system is different to in Scotland. There's a fragmentation. You have maintained schools, academies and free schools. And many council leaders we speak to have got no idea what's happening in the various schools in their patch. In Scotland, where the schools are maintained, councils are more in control and have more of a say, can give more support to the schools when children become disruptive or show patterns that can eventually lead to them being excluded. So the point we're making is, if you look at Glasgow and Scotland, for example, in 2017, only 1 child was excluded because they had the resources and support to take measures before a child got to be excluded. In England and Wales in 2017, more than 7,000 children were excluded, an increase from 4,000 3 years before. So the point we're making is that
7,000 children excluded, how many of them have gone on to commit knife crime? I'm just trying to find the link here, because if you're focusing in on this one issue today, we're talking about knife crime crisis, and I'm just trying to find out what the actual link is between school exclusions and knife crime, because it does seem like an odd thing to be focusing on when you talk about a plethora of issues, one of them being, you know, tougher sentencing, the other being stop and search. Why are you focusing on school exclusions?
Well, it's one of the issues we're focusing on. The HMIP, the Prisons Inspectorate, recently said that when they visited secure training centres, young offenders institutions, 9 out of 10 people in custody were excluded children. We know when you speak to adult offenders, many of them when they were younger were excluded, often, by the way, for very good reasons. If you're a head teacher, you can understand why you want to make sure that education of the vast majority of children is not made worse by a disruptive child or a violent child. But also the Children's Commissioner and Ofsted have expressed concern about this issue of off-rolling. That's where a head teacher doesn't exclude a child but takes them off the roll in consultation with the parent and often the vulnerable carer and parent. And the point we're making, amongst a variety of other points, is these are vulnerable children who, without support, can go on to get involved in criminal gangs or get involved in criminality. I'm not by any way saying that every child who's excluded will turn into a criminal, but there is a link, and we think the government, the Prime Minister, needs to take ownership of this issue.
OK. Well, you think it's one of the causes that may be leading to this spike in knife crime. But let's talk about the effect of which we are seeing on the streets. Last night, somebody died in East London. Where do you stand on stop and search? Because a lot of people are riding this wave of support for it, like the Prime Minister. You've never been a huge fan of this. Police, though, are saying they think it's a vital tactic. Do you support their efforts to make stop and search more widely used once again?
It is a vital tactic. I've seen it myself, the difference it can make made when used properly. In London, I can't speak for the rest of the country, there's been a game changer, which is that I've made sure that we've rolled out the biggest body-worn videos of any police force in the world. So every police officer in London has a body-worn video. Why is that important? It gives a police officer confidence to use this really important tool, knowing the interaction is going to be recorded, so a vexatious complaint won't be made against a police officer. But it also gives Londoners confidence knowing the interaction is being recorded. And what we've seen in London over the recent past is an increase in the use of stop and search, but the number of complaints has stayed steady and actually gone down. And I think body-worn videos has been the real game changer for us in London.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're now saying you think it's a vital tool. When you were campaigning to become Mayor of London, you said you'd do everything in your power to bring stop and search down. And when you campaigned to be Mayor, you made violent crime in London at the heart of your manifesto, including knife crime. You were elected 3 years ago on that manifesto. And 3 years in, on your watch, knife crime in the capital is at its highest level on record. You're getting a lot of criticism for this. Looking at that, is it justified? Have you lost control on this issue? Well,
you've raised 4 points in one question. Let me deal with each one at a time. Firstly, in relation to my campaign, I was quite clear that the industrial indiscriminate use of stop and search is wrong. In London, the big game changer has been the body-worn video, which gives accountability, but also it's targeted and intelligence-led in the first 8 months of the City Hall funding violent crime task force. Because of stop and search is one of the reasons, we've had more than 3,000 arrests leading to charges, but also more than 1,000 knives, offensive weapons and guns taken off our streets that would be used against Londoners. That's the first point. The second point is in London, just London alone, over the last 8 years, our Met Police Service has lost more than £800 million from central government as a consequence of cuts. That's led to us having more than 3,000 fewer police officers, thousands of fewer community support officers and thousands of fewer police staff. On top of that, dozens of youth centres closing down, hundreds of youth workers losing their jobs, thousands of young Londoners without having a youth centre to go to. What we've done from City Hall is using council tax increases. I've raised it 3 years in a row. The previous mayor didn't raise it, but also used monies from business rates to invest in policing, but also to invest in youth services and young people. The investment we're giving doesn't fill the massive hole left by central government. We're funding this much when the hole is this big.
I mean, you keep shifting it onto central government, and I understand that the cuts, they're well documented. They are well documented. But just in terms of your personal responsibility, if you didn't believe you could affect change when you campaigned to become Mayor of London, why put it at the heart of your manifesto? If you're going to hold your hands up now and go, look, it's central government, we haven't got enough funding, what can you be doing as Mayor of London? What personal responsibility are you taking for this?
Well, I was explaining some of the things that we're doing. The City Hall funding violent crime task force.
I know, but while you're explaining what's being done and these wheels are in motion, knife crime is going up. People are dying. 2 people in London in the last few days.
Well, also somebody, unfortunately, in Oxford last night, somebody in Manchester on Friday.
Yes, I know, but you're Mayor of London, so I want to talk about what's happening in London and what personal responsibility you're taking and what powers you have as Mayor of London away from government to do something.
Well, 80% of the budget for the Met Police Service, 80% comes from central government. Roughly speaking, 20% comes from City Hall. We've increased that as much as I'm allowed to do under the law. Secondly, we've invested £45 million in a Young Londoners fund. At the moment, there are 60,000 young Londoners receiving support they weren't before I became Mayor.